It began in a small car wash in Brasília. Not in a heavily guarded government office, not in a sprawling corporate boardroom in São Paulo, and certainly not in a presidential palace. This was a mundane, ordinary business, a Posto de Torre gas station and car wash, sitting unassumingly in Brazil's capital city. For years, ordinary citizens drove in and out, completely unaware of what was happening behind the scenes. It was the absolute last place anyone would expect to find the single thread that would unravel a continent.
But as authorities began to follow the money, the entire system started to collapse. Investigators discovered that the illicit funds flowing through that incredibly ordinary business were intimately connected to a sprawling, deeply entrenched corruption network worth literally billions of dollars. This wasn't a localized crime ring. It was a global network involving powerful oil executives, multinational construction giants like Odebrecht, influential politicians, secret offshore accounts, and staggering payouts hidden across multiple continents. This was not just a bribery scheme. It was a meticulously engineered financial system.
The following investigative explainer is based on publicly reported investigations, court proceedings, official documents, and verified journalistic reporting related to Operation Car Wash or Lava Jato. Some details are simplified for clarity and narrative flow. This analysis focuses strictly on the investigative process and the undeniable evidence uncovered by authorities. But, as investigators discovered, the truth is often hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to look closely enough at the numbers.
To understand how a singular clue brought down an empire, we have to examine exactly what authorities found at the very beginning of their inquiry. In 2014, Brazilian federal police began looking into what appeared to be a routine, unremarkable currency exchange operation. It was the kind of local financial crime that barely makes the back pages of a newspaper. But the discrepancy in the financial records was glaring. On one hand, you have the standard, predictable revenue of a local gas station. On the other, you have massive, unexplained financial transactions that completely defied basic economic logic. The numbers were simply too large and the patterns were far too unusual for the scale of a local business. And crucially, the people connected to those specific accounts were not ordinary customers buying fuel. They included wealthy businessmen, specialized intermediaries, and individuals with direct links to some of the nation's major corporations. Because of its humble origins at that gas station, the investigation was officially given a rather literal name, Operation Lava Jato, which translates directly to Operation Car Wash. At the time, no one knew it yet, but this small, highly specific financial inquiry into suspicious accounts was about to explode. It was about to expose one of the largest, most sophisticated corruption networks in modern history, fundamentally altering the political and economic landscape of Latin America. When investigators find anomalies of this magnitude, standard procedure dictates one simple rule: you have to follow the money. As investigators examined the financial records from the car wash, the case expanded rapidly. The money, it turned out, was not staying in Brazil. The evidence revealed a highly sophisticated three-step mechanical process. First, major construction companies allegedly inflated the total value of massive contracts to secure highly lucrative agreements. Second, they took that excess, artificially inflated money and systematically distributed it as bribes. Third, to hide these massive payouts, they routed the funds through complex offshore accounts and fake consulting firms designed to conceal the money's true origin. Authorities realized they were no longer looking at an isolated case of local corruption. That hidden financial trail ultimately led directly to the most powerful economic engine in the country. At the absolute center of this systemic bribery was Petrobras, Brazil's state-owned oil company, with an annual budget in the tens of billions of dollars. It was one of the largest energy companies in the world. According to court records, executives within the company accepted bribes, often around 1% to 3% of the total contract value, from major construction firms in exchange for awarding these massively inflated contracts. This wasn't just abstract paper money moving through computers. This corruption literally built the physical world around them. These corrupt firms constructed critical infrastructure, highways, massive hydroelectric dams, international airports, and continental megaprojects. For years, the system allegedly operated in total secrecy.
But a shadow economy of this size couldn't operate on handshake agreements alone. It required meticulous, documented administration. As Operation Car Wash continued to expand, investigators uncovered a sprawling network of intermediaries whose sole job was to move this money discreetly. The evidence revealed meticulous, highly organized ledgers, Executives allegedly kept actual spreadsheets tracking the illicit payouts. They didn't just distribute cash randomly. They mapped it out with accounting precision. Looking at the columns in their ledgers, they matched the exact recipient to the specific payment amount, tied it directly back to the inflated contract value, and even noted the specific intermediary used to wash the funds. Those documents became some of the most undeniably important evidence in the entire case.
As the domestic network unraveled, the investigation inevitably crossed international borders to track the final destination of the funds.
One of the investigation's most significant breakthroughs came through international cooperation, specifically when Swiss authorities handed over banking records linked to these hidden accounts. According to court records, the data showed hidden funds split across three main pillars. The money was funneled into anonymous shell companies, channeled through fake consulting firms that provided no actual services, and buried in Swiss offshore accounts. For investigators, these records were invaluable. They documented exactly how millions of dollars crossed international borders, how they were actively concealed by financial professionals, and how they eventually returned to those who allegedly benefited from the corruption. The sheer scale of the evidence would soon trigger a geopolitical earthquake, reshaping accountability across an entire continent. As the staggering volume of evidence grew, Operation Car Wash led to a massive wave of high-profile arrests. It started in 2014 as a simple local car wash inquiry. But just months later, the massive Petrobras scheme was entirely exposed. Years later, it triggered a full-blown national crisis in Brazil, entangling former presidents, senior government officials, and major corporate executives. And looking at its present legacy, the investigation is no longer confined to Brazil. It cascaded across Latin America, sparking ongoing investigations and legal reckoning in Peru, Colombia, Argentina, and beyond. Operation Car Wash fundamentally changed the way the world understands and prosecutes large-scale corruption. It proved that modern corruption is rarely confined to one country. When political figures in Peru or corporate leaders in Colombia are pulled into a scandal originating at a Brazilian gas station, it becomes clear that money moves globally and companies operate internationally. And importantly, it showed that evidence often lies hidden in complex financial records, sprawling offshore accounts, and deeply buried corporate documents. While the investigation raised difficult questions about justice and democratic institutions, one fact remains completely undeniable. A small inquiry exposed a multi-billion-dollar network, proving that even the most powerful, heavily shielded systems leave traces. Operation Car Wash was not simply a story about corporate greed or political malfeasance. It was fundamentally a story about evidence. About dedicated professionals who decided to follow the money and track financial records when others saw only routine paperwork. About unprecedented international cooperation that crossed oceans in pursuit of the truth. And about a vast system of power that genuinely believed it could hide behind inflated contracts, shell companies, and offshore accounts. But as this investigation proved, every payment leaves a record, every contract leaves a document, and every crime leaves an echo.
Thank you for joining me on this investigative explainer. If you want to uncover the truth behind the world's biggest corruption scandals, subscribe to Echoes of Evidence. Let me know in the comments which piece of evidence do you believe changed Operation Car Wash the most? Because evidence remembers. Truth prevails. I'll see you in the next investigation.